All right, guys. Some big announcements were recently made regarding the UFC's annual trip to the Big Apple. UFC 309's main event is official. Jon Jones will be defending his undisputed heavyweight title versus Stipe Miocic. And in the 5-round non-title co-main event rematch, we have Charles Oliveira versus Michael Chandler. React. Let's go to Farah Hanoun. What did you think of this announcement? Clears up a lot of things.
I mean, obviously, the main event comes as absolutely no surprise. It's all what we were all expecting. We were hearing November, we were hearing MSG. I'm sure there's nobody happier than Tom Aspinall that this finally has a date. So I think it's more like everybody's happy that it finally has a date. In terms of the co-main event, I think a little bit of a surprise because I do believe Dan Hooker, after his last fight, his win over Mateus Gamrot, he was kind of hinting that the UFC were looking at him and Charles Oliveira. So I was a little bit surprised to see that Chandler is matched up with Oliveira. Am I entirely surprised that he moved on? I mean, I'm surprised that it took him that long to move on. But obviously, I think that's a topic we're going to cover later on. Yeah, so a little bit of a curveball in terms of this rematch. I wonder what Charles Oliveira has to gain. He did win the first fight. Amazing fight, by the way. Obviously, Chandler was able to drop him early, and then he ended up getting finished. Well, it's a typical Charles Oliveira fight, right? But a little bit surprised in terms of Charles Oliveira because he did come off a close loss to Arman Sarukian, so he almost got the title shot. Now he has to fight Michael Chandler. Not too much to gain for him. If you're Michael Chandler, this obviously seems like a little bit of a reward from the UFC because the McGregor fight didn't happen. Although he did mention that if he beats Charles Oliveira, that it puts him in the title picture, but he could also still get the McGregor fight. So obviously, it's I guess as good as a reward as you can get for Michael Chandler if you're not going to fight Conor McGregor. Charles
Yeah.
Oliveira, on the other hand, I'm a little bit surprised at this fight for him in particular. I love Charles Oliveira, watch him fight anybody, but I just wonder that there's quite a bit of like things to lose for him if he loses to a Michael Chandler, a guy you already beat. And I know Michael Chandler has built up a really good name for himself, but it's his last win over Tony Ferguson, I believe. So if you're Charles Oliveira, it's a bit of a risky fight. If you're Michael Chandler, I guess it seems like one of the better rewards you can get in terms of a second-ranked former champion Charles Oliveira, a chance at redemption, and at the same time, well, we'll see what comes out of it. But I believe if he can still get that McGregor fight, he'll still get it. He'll still go for it. But as for now, so that was a little bit of a curveball. Jones Miocic is what we expected.
Yeah, and Mike, we've been speculating and going all over all these rumors for the last 6 months. Now it's finally here. What's your excitement level in all this?
Pretty mid to low, I guess I would say, just because we've talked about this for over a year on the show about how I don't like this fight and how I don't feel it makes a ton of sense, but we don't need to rehash all that. You can go watch like 20 past episodes where we've had this same conversation. I guess to be positive here, I'm glad it's booked. We have a date. It's not that far away, just a couple months. So let's get this over with so we can restart a real heavyweight division. I mean, how am I supposed to get excited for this when Dana White does interviews over the weekend with Complex saying this is pretty much 100% Stipe Miocic's retirement fight, and then a video just comes out this morning of Jon Jones speaking to someone Saturday at UFC 306 saying that this is more than likely his retirement fight. So I guess my biggest hope is whoever wins, if they both do retire, that Jon Jones, assuming it's him, actually does hand Tom Aspinall the heavyweight title on his way out of the cage, because that's going to be as close as we get to seeing that. And we can have Tom Aspinall as our real champion and move forward with this division, because this whole thing is being pretty ridiculous.
Danny, if that scenario plays out, who do you think hands that belt to Tom Aspinall? Sneaky way of saying who do you think wins?
Dana White.
Jon Jones, obviously. Stipe Miocic. I saw a stat on Twitter not so long ago that Miocic currently doesn't hold a single win over an active UFC heavyweight, meaning all his wins are expired pretty much. All of them are out of the UFC or retired. Yeah, this fight kind of just feels like it's holding hostage the heavyweight division. As Mike mentioned, you hear that Miocic is going to walk away, and then you hear that most likely Jones will be doing the same. So it's like, what are we doing here? What does this fight mean? And meanwhile, you have somebody like Tom Aspinall on the sidelines with an interim title and a defense as well. I just want to get this over with. I'm glad it was booked just so we finally kind of can look forward to being done with this. But not too excited for the fight, to be honest. And yeah, I mean, what is the real meaning of this fight at this point? Especially both guys aren't going to stick around. Let's just get this over with. I just hope that November comes around quick, and that's it.
And
The
seeing
only, just to
Francis.
pop in, George, the only outcome that would be hilarious here is if Stipe Miocic wins, because then we're getting a rematch and then maybe a trilogy fight, and Tom Aspinall might as well go fight in PFL or something because he's not seeing a
Watch there be
title
a draw or
unification fight for
something.
years. Yeah.
Watch
Yeah.
Miocic win, and Dana still argue that Jon Jones is pound for pound the number one.
Then he's gonna
Yeah.
argue that Miocic is pound for pound. Gonna
You know,
list all
seeing
these,
that
like, old ass
B-roll,
stats.
and by the way, the only show on the internet that'll show you that kind of B-roll. Shout out to Ken Hathaway. Shout out to Kamikaze, from this past weekend's fights or all the other fights that have taken place. Just seeing Francis Ngannou and saying, "Wow, he was under the UFC banner recently." Tom Aspinall's just sitting there like we could have some real special fights, and yet we're kind of stuck with this one, and none of us are happy about it. And we're all OGs here. We're trying to see the bright side and all of it, and we're just happy that it's booked so it can be done and over with and we can move on. And that's a damn sad thing. Spada, you look like you want to chime in?
Yeah, I was gonna say it's funny because Jones hasn't fought in years. We saw him a little bit against Gan, but we didn't see that much of Jon Jones. So I still have a lot of question marks of how Jon Jones is gonna look. So unless he runs through Stipe Miocic, I'm actually quite intrigued to see more of Jon Jones. But I think if we get anything of a competitive fight, we're just gonna get the "I told you so" from Dana White, like why Miocic and Jones should have happened. So I'm just intrigued to see how Jon Jones looks. We haven't really seen him fight too much. I mean, in the 1 minute or so against Gan, it's not, I mean, he did run through him, but I was just interested to see more of the striking, more of the speed and everything. So I just hope this fight stretches out a little bit because I'm just intrigued. There are question marks surrounding both really on their form.
Yeah. Mike, we already heard Fada's take. She likes, for Chandler's sake, the Oliveira booking because it may even get him close to a title shot should he win. Did you like that matchup for Michael Chandler? I guess his plan B since he didn't get McGregor.
Yeah, it's good. I mean, he was, I think, the favorite at one point against Conor McGregor, and he opened as the pretty sizable underdog against Charles Oliveira. So in terms of like him getting a win, I felt much more confident in him versus McGregor at this stage than him versus Oliveira. So that's a little bit scary. But if he loses this fight, I don't think it necessarily gets him out of the running for McGregor. If they do, if he comes back, that's a whole other thing. But let's say he does, I don't think him being on 2 losses is any worse than being on 3 losses. Whatever. It's going to be the same thing. Conor fought Cerrone off of 3 losses. So that would not surprise me one bit, even if he loses badly. But yeah, I mean, the upside here, division-wise, is pretty good. He makes fair points for the most part in what he's saying. Islam's going to fight Arman, and then it's a little bit wide open in terms of who could step in there with a statement performance. I think it's possible for him to get that title shot. And I do think his name value through this whole process, as agonizing as being with Conor McGregor, people know who Michael Chandler is a lot more than they did 2 years ago, even though he hasn't fought a single time in that stretch. So I think he is a pretty big name in the sport, relatively speaking, co-headlining Madison Square Garden under Jon Jones. Besides headlining a pay-per-view with Conor McGregor, I don't think you could really ask for a better fight card positioning there. I hope they're taking care of him with pay-per-view buys or something else coming out of this card to at least make up some of the things he lost from the McGregor fight. But from like a skill progression point, yeah, having a win over Conor McGregor in your cap, there's nothing that compares to that. But he said his goal from day one was to be the UFC lightweight champion. And if that is first and foremost, this is the fight you take. This is the fight you do. And if you win, it opens up a whole world for you.
Yeah. Well, let's take a look at 309 as Danny tells us who he thinks is going to win the Oliveira Chandler matchup. Who do you like, Danny Segura?
Yeah, I'm going to go with Oliveira here. I think Chandler, like, keep in mind, like, he lost 2 years of already a very limited prime. When he entered the UFC, he was already quite up there in age, and he's really been out of action for almost 2 years. Now he's 38 years old. Not only is he inactive, but the age factor. And then Oliveira, like, we saw him against Saruki, and yeah, he lost, but he's still game. Like, he's still a very dangerous fighter. So, and he's already proven to be able to have a style that's effective against Chandler, obviously beating him in the past. So I think anybody can win here, obviously. But if you thought the first fight was even and you were slightly favoring Oliveira, you got to favor Oliveira much more now at this point. So I'm going with Oliveira, but I guess with Chandler, you never know. He does pack power, and there's always that factor that he can finish the fight at any time.
Did that card jump off for you guys? Do you like it so far? What you're seeing? You know, I mean, some pretty big names, but again, not to crap on the heavyweight fight. Entertainment value, $80. Like, you know, all this weight. You know, Bo Nickel is getting a tougher test, obviously, now with Paul Craig. Natalia Silva versus Vivian Araújo.
That's incorrect too, George. Just to jump in, it's actually Karine Silva versus Araujo, and Anthony Smith versus Dominic Reyes is on UFC 210 in December, not this card. So they were focused so much on the production of the Sphere, they messed up the fight card graphics on this thing.
Chris Weidman's legit though, right?
Yes.
He's a New Yorker. All
That's
right.
got to be his retirement fight.
You guys like it?
How many
Thumbs up,
retirements are we
thumbs
getting
down,
at
or
UFC
sideways?
309? Could be minimum 3.
There's probably going to be a line for that. There could be like 3 or 4. Yeah.
Does that card need more pop, or are you guys happy with it as it is, or what are you feeling?
It's all right. I mean, that's the thing. This is what you're going to get out of cards like this, headlined by Jon Jones and Conor McGregor. You know, they had an exception last year when they went into New York with the 2 title fights, but that's because it was the Pereira fight, I believe, is the co-main event, and no one was champion, so they didn't have to pay pay-per-view points out to a co-main event because no one was a sitting champion. So on Jon Jones and Conor McGregor cards, you're very unlikely to see a second title fight unless it's a vacant, an interim, or maybe a women's fight too, where they might not have pay-per-view points in their contract.
Joseph Boza says somebody, or maybe Dana finally got it in Chandler's ear. Chandler looks like a fool for holding out for 2 years for a fight. That ain't happening. Conor called Chandler a chicken for not waiting. Yeah. Conor kind of has a lot of nerve, honestly, for that one, acting all surprised. We'll get to that in just a second.